Mastering Islam Live. Once again, I am convinced that something, somewhere, on this computer is going to start making noise here any second, because somehow I managed to do it every single time. And I don't hear anything, so now I'm wondering if I'm even on, because I always make noise somehow when I go on, when I go live. All right, but I see, never mind, I see the comments coming up, so I must be live. So, all right, well, I finally was able to get on and not make a bunch of extra noise. So let me just go ahead and pull up this site so I can see my face and see if anything goes wrong. Anthony, how things been going for you?
Everything's going good.
See any initial comments that you want to respond to?
No, I was just setting a few things up here as we get started. But,
I believe we're good, and we can jump right into some questions.
All right.
Oh, everyone's telling us where they're from again. So, hi from Montreal. Hey, I guess this is now the in thing, as everyone tells us where they're from. All right, everyone go ahead and tell us where you're from, because it is cool to see. So we've got England, we've got Melbourne, Melbourne, Australia, Scotland, Southern California, more Scotland, England, Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts when I was real young. Later I went to West Virginia. We have some requests to turn off the slow-mo. I'm going to have a real good reason to turn off the slow-mo, because when it's not on, the comments come so fast that I can't even read them. Like, if I try to read one, boom, it's gone off there, and I have to scroll back and find it. So we'll keep it on for a while until we think that there is a very good reason to turn it off. Renee says she wants to see Anthony Rogers debate Shabir. There's a lot of people who'd like to see Anthony debate Shabir. In fact, we're going to have a comment here about
Anthony would like to see Anthony debate Shabir.
Yeah.
I've been trying for years.
Everyone loves Anthony Rogers. All right, so we have people from around the world: Wisconsin, Nigeria, China, Michigan, Virginia, Saudi Arabia, Nashville, LA, multiple people in Boston, again, Saudi Arabia, Texas, Washington, Germany, Canada, South Africa, Bangladesh. So we have, hey, West Virginia, Patrick. It's a good place. It's a good place. Egypt, Portland, India, Algeria, several people from Texas, New York, Costa Rica, all over the place. Tons of people all over the United States, all over the world. Well, that's cool, because we have should have an interesting show. You know what's interesting? I was going through the comments on the last video, taking screenshots of interesting questions or objections, and there are a lot of interesting questions that I came across. So we're going to go ahead and start taking a look at some of these, and then we'll pause to go through the chat here in a little bit. But let's go ahead and take a look at one. These first two are from patrons. I remind everyone that we'll start each show with questions from patrons. If we have people who contribute on Patreon and send us questions, we'll start with those. So if you want to contribute to Patreon, you can. That link's in the description box. And yeah, so the quickest way to get your questions through would be to subscribe to Anthony's Patreon page and start sending him some questions. So Alan pointed out, David, Come to Islam TV challenged you to a live debate during the live stream and chat. Will you give him one if he doesn't coward out like Abdul S. did? So Abdul S. was a Muslim who said he wanted to join in the discussion. I didn't know that Abdul chickened out, but if he did, well, that's fine. So Come to Islam TV challenged us to debate. What do you think, Anthony? Are we willing to debate on here? So that would just be on this. We would call in by Skype, and we would have him on by Skype. We certainly wouldn't take him on, both of us at the same time, so one would moderate while the other while the other debates. So, Anthony, are we willing to debate? Is that something we'd be willing to do? Hey, you're muted again, man. What's your problem?
You always complain about my typing in the background.
Yeah, that's to get you to set up your mic differently, where it's not like right beside your keyboard or something. So,
I don't know why it's so loud, but yes, absolutely, we would be willing to debate. We are almost willing to pay him, but we won't.
Hey, you know what I should have had ready? Might have to do this for the future. But you're old enough to remember this. A lot of the people here will have no clue what we're talking about. But I was right when I asked you that, I was thinking of remember Roddy Piper when he asked Hulk Hogan, will you face Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3? And he goes, yeah. That's how we should play that every time we get challenged to a debate. We can play that. So yes, Come to Islam TV. I don't know if you're here yet, but yes, we're happy to debate. We would, if you have some Islamic topic in mind, happy to do that. If you have a Christian topic in mind, then we'll need to pair that with an Islamic topic, because we don't want you to pull the same stunt that Muslim debaters in the past have, namely that we just focus on Christian topics all the time, and Islam never has anything to defend. So some interesting good topics would be, if you wanted to debate like the deity of Christ, we could pair that with a debate on whether Muhammad's a prophet. Or you could go with some other claim that Muslims make that we would like to address, like has the Quran been perfectly preserved? But yes, we can certainly make that happen. Let us know, and we will set it up. We could even do it next week if you wanted. We can set that up. So the answer there was yes. Next question. This one is from a patron named Wade. He said, what are the sources for the martyrdom of the apostles? I can't seem to find anything solid apart from the book of Acts, mostly just legends from the 3rd and 4th century. What did you find that made you rethink your whole worldview? So that last part there seems to be directed towards me, specifically my testimony. What was I going on when I concluded that the apostles had died horrible, bloody deaths? At that point, so back early on, where I was in jail studying Christianity. Back then it was Fox's Book of Martyrs, right? So Fox's Book of Martyrs includes a variety of martyred Christians, and at the beginning goes through how the apostles died. Now, Wade has a point here that some of these stories you hear about the martyrdoms of the apostles are based on much later sources. In other words, they do come from something in the 3rd or 4th century. So some of those would be in doubt, provided the story, if the story just comes out of nowhere and we have nothing earlier to go on, then we might call the story into question. With that said, we have a very good idea of how many of the apostles died. So some of the stories, yes, from the 3rd or 4th century would be in question, would be in doubt, but a number aren't. So Anthony, what's a general overview of what we know about what the apostles were willing to endure?
Yeah, well, one thing I would say really quickly is a lot of our knowledge of the early history of the Christian church and the apostles and their successors and so forth comes from people like Eusebius, who was the father of church history. And so even though it's a 4th century work, his ecclesiastical history, it's based on sources that he had access to at his disposal. Of course, people like to question that sort of thing. They want to be able to look at even earlier sources, and we obviously like earlier sources too. But
we would love to have some of the sources that Eusebius had.
Right. So he makes reference to all sorts of things, and what's exciting sometimes is when you see one of those sources pop up later. They've been lost to history, but then later we find something. So sometimes we do, fortunately, run across one of these earlier sources, but.
So the side point here would be that if someone in the 4th century is giving an account or saying something about something that happened in the 1st century, that could be reliable or unreliable depending on where he's getting his information from. If it just comes out of nowhere and there's no clue where he got it, well, yeah, we might not want to trust it. If he says, yeah, I got it from this 2nd century source, which maybe you guys don't have, but the people of my time had it and would know if I'm making it up, then might still be reliable.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So here I just give one source, which is a really early source, actually. So we do have stuff earlier than Eusebius, but this comes from Clement in his epistle to the Corinthians. So it's one of our earliest extant extra-biblical Christian writing that we have. It was written, there's actually some discussion on this. Scholars disagree. Some would say it was written before AD 70, but everyone agrees that it's an early, perhaps towards the end of the first century piece of writing. And in it, Clement makes reference in general to the persecution and death of the apostles, but then specifically speaks of the death of Peter and Paul. And you find that in section 5 of the first part of his work. And I'm saying that way because some sources will number it differently. But the source that I'm using simply has that as section 5. But here's what he says. To pass from the examples of ancient days, he's referring to Old Testament believers who suffered martyrdom. To pass from examples of that sort, he says, let us come to those champions who lived very near to our own time. Let us set before us the noble examples which belong to our generation. So here's an indication of just how early this work is. He's referring to people, in particular the apostles, who died in our generation. He says, by reason of jealousy and envy, the greatest and most righteous pillars of the church were persecuted and contended even unto death. And then he goes on specifically to mention Peter and Paul. So here we have a first century witness to the deaths of Peter and Paul. And also, by the way, I should throw in here that many believe that this Clement that we're referring to here, who was the fourth, if you will, pastor of the church in Rome, is the same person that Paul was referring to in Philippians 4:3. So he's just that early.
Mm-hmm. So if we're going with the point there, Wade, is that Clement is, again, it's either the 90s, writing in the 90s, or earlier, but this is a guy who knew leaders in the early church and very likely knew one or more of the apostles. So this is not 3rd or 4th century information. So you would combine this with other information we have, namely that we do have in the book of Acts, certainly 1st century, the death of the apostle James, the brother of John, and you also have in the book of Acts at least the willingness of the apostles to die throughout that book. So they're willing to face death. At the end of the Gospel of John, the Gospel writer is pretty clearly aware of the death of Peter. So that's another 1st century reference to the martyrdom of Peter. He's clearly aware of how Peter died. Interestingly, you have Josephus, which refers to the death of James, the brother of Jesus, who was stoned to death. So you have James there, then Clement, as Anthony pointed out, and Polycarp refers to the sufferings that the apostles endured. So these are very early materials by 1st century witnesses or people who knew 1st century witnesses. And so you have all of that. And then, of course, later sources which include specifics about how particular apostles died. Those are going to have to be examined on a case-by-case basis. And Sean McDowell has actually done this. He goes through all of the sources on these different stories to sort of see what's reliable and what's not. And he has a book on that, but I've included a link to a lecture in the description box. So if you go down to the bottom of the description box, there's a link by Sean McDowell, and he goes through the stories about the deaths of the apostles to see what's reliable and what would be called into question. So hopefully that helps, and let's move on. And by the way, Anthony, stop me anytime if you see a comment over in the chat that you want to address. This one is just asking for a little advice here. This is Jessie from England, and I know Jessie's here because I think I just saw her in the chat box. But she says, "Hi from England. I'm so desperate to learn how to debate Islam. Not sure where to go or how to get started. Any help from anyone would be she'd be grateful." Now I assume that she's not referring to formal debate, just referring to how would you debate and discuss Islam. So, what advice would you have, Anthony?
Well, obviously you need to be very familiar with the Bible. First of all, you need to be familiar with what the Bible teaches about God, Christ, salvation, man, and so forth. You can't defend what you don't know. So, I mean, the verse that most often quoted when it comes to defending the faith specifically says that we're to be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks us a reason for the hope that's within us. And so your first order of responsibility is to be able to explain and defend what the Bible teaches about God and Christ and so forth. Your first order of business is not to know everything there is to know about Islam or any other religion, but simply the faith that you're proclaiming and in which you believe. But then, as far as learning about Islam, you should make use of the resources that we put out. Obviously, you have scores of videos on the website, on the YouTube page. You have articles on answering Islam. There's the blog that has numerous past discussions that we've had with Muslims, and then of course there's the debates that we've done. I think you have a whole section on Answering Muslims page where you've listed all the debates that you've done, don't you?
Me,
it's been a while since I looked.
I don't think so. I'm not aware of any official. I don't even think I've listed all the debates I've done.
I thought there was a separate section that you made on the blog at one point, where you could just look at where the debates are.
Oh no, there is a that's not comprehensive. I just stuck a bunch of debates on the page for people who are interested in debates. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just throwing some things out there. I think those would be some good things to do and keep in mind.
Yeah. And I would add kind of just so you know, we recorded a video. Me and John McRae and Vocab recorded a video titled "How to Share the Gospel with a Muslim." And I haven't edited it yet, but when I do, it should be helpful as far as taking things step by step. But yeah, as Anthony pointed out, you want to be able to defend the gospel, and fortunately, that's not as difficult as some might think. There are lots of objections that Muslims might have, but they tend to revolve around 5 to 7 particular objections, and if you can get those down, you'll be good when they challenge the Bible. In fact, if you go to you're already here on YouTube, but after this, type in the Islamic Dilemma into YouTube, and my video, the Islamic Dilemma, pops up. If Christians would just learn that would change the face of apologetics. If Christians knew that the Quran affirms the inspiration, preservation, and authority of the Torah and the Gospel, if Christians knew that and could show it from the Quran, that ends a lot of Muslim objections. So any doctrine at that point that you can defend from the Bible, when a Muslim objects and says, "Well, that your Bible's been corrupted," you can go ahead and show him that he's just committed apostasy from Islam. So those are some initial pointers, and I would say it kind of depends on what you're interested in, right? Because some people are more interested in sort of counter-jihad debates, dealing with Sharia and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, you'd want to familiarize yourself with what the Quran says and how to respond to objections to that. Things Muhammad said, we have tons of materials on those. And other people are more interested in in gospel issues, sharing the gospel and so on. So figure out what you're most interested in, which direction you want to go, and start studying the materials. We've got materials on all of that stuff. So, and by the way, there are other people in the chat box who can help you out as well. Wanted to recognize some super chatters here. Apple Goo. Hello, Apple Goo. Nice name. Top Dead Center said, "Do I get cursed more than 20 times a week during prayers?" If you're referring to Islamic prayers, yes, Muslims say during their daily prayers multiple times. They pray to Allah, not to make them like the Jews and the Christians. So so there are constant Muslim prayers going up about not being like Jews and Christians.
Yeah, let me just throw in there that the curse comes in Surah Al-Fatiha, the first chapter of the Quran, which Muslims use in their daily prayers numerous times. So it curses Jews and Christians and Muslims. There's no Muslim who can really claim to be a Muslim who doesn't know that. Mm-hmm. And so every Muslim, whether they are consciously aware of it or not, that's what they're doing daily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you want to know the prayer that's said multiple times a day, just open up a Quran and go to Surah 1. LJ says, the work you do is a blessing. Keep up the work to the glory of Christ. Well, thank you, and we certainly will. And there was one more down here. LJ said, LJ again. I have a question. What is the most important doctrine of the Islamic religion for Muslims? What would that be, Anthony?
Well, without question, the most important doctrine, according to Muslims, is the doctrine of Tawheed, which is just another way of referring to Unitarianism, the idea that Allah is simply one person. So Allah is monopersonal. To say that he is more than one person, as in the Christian Trinity, or to say that there are other gods in addition to him, is to violate that fundamental principle. Now, Muslims often will accuse Christians of saying there are multiple gods, but of course that's not what we're saying. That's never been what we're saying. We were affirming monotheism before Muhammad even got the bright idea, or not so bright idea, to pretend that he's a prophet. So Muhammad's really a Johnny-come-lately here and didn't recognize that the previous scriptures not only taught that there's only one God, but that the true God is tripersonal, and so has within himself everything he needs for communication, fellowship, love, and so forth. So the most important doctrine in Islam is Tawheed, that there's only one person and he's the only God, and anyone who says other than that is guilty of the greatest sin in Islam, the sin of shirk.
And given the importance of this doctrine in Islam, it's clearly going to be coming up over and over again as we do these programs, and that's going to be fun because we don't think that Islam is as clearly monotheistic as Muslims claim, do we? No,
absolutely not. I pointed out on a previous broadcast that when you recognize, take a passage like Surah 4, 171, where Allah allegedly tells Muhammad to tell Christians, say not three, Allah is only one God. So unless the Quran is wrong, and obviously we think the Quran is wrong, and it's wrong a lot, but no Muslim can accept that the Quran is wrong. So when the Quran objects to the Christian statement that God is three, it has to be objecting to what Christians actually mean by that. Mm-hmm. That's not that there are three separate gods, but that within the unity of the Godhead, the same divine being, the same essence or nature, there are three persons. And so we don't make a distinction between separate gods, but a distinction within God, a personal distinction. Now, Muslims, in objecting to that then, on the basis of the Quran, have to be saying that there's no plurality in the nature of God. Okay, and this is a fundamental point that people have to get. It's not simply a denial that there's an additional being next to God. It's the denial that God himself can exist in himself in simply an abstract, oneness, right? So that being the case, if Muslims are going to be consistent, then they have to deny that Allah has attributes. Here go some of my sounds that we were supposed to have off. Let me just stop that real quick. So Muslims, if they were consistent, would have to say that Allah doesn't have multiple attributes, because then they're saying that Allah is not merely one. He has a plurality within his nature in some sense. And this was actually recognized by early Muslims. Somebody asked the question the other day about the Mu'tazili, and the Mu'tazili argued that if you say Allah has multiple attributes, then you're like Christians who say that God is not only one, but also in some sense many. Mm-hmm. And so the Mu'tazili argued that Allah doesn't have any attributes. Well, that was debated for a number of years in Islam, actually for 2 centuries. The Mu'tazili were the dominant party in Islam. But what became Orthodox Sunnism was the idea that Allah does have multiple attributes, including His Word, the Quran. And here's what's interesting. They didn't simply say that these are attributes in His nature, but that the Quran is something other than Allah. The Quran is not Allah. Mm-hmm. No Muslim would say the Quran is Allah. And so Muslims are actually guilty of the very thing they often accuse us of teaching. Right? The Quran is something separate and additional to Allah, and it's eternal. Mm-hmm. So they have 2 eternal things, at least. Mm-hmm. And we could really add more to that.
Oh, yeah. And In future episodes, we'll be adding all kinds of things to that, because you've got Allah praying. Who's he praying to? You've got Muslims bowing down to a pagan shrine and kissing the black stone, and you've got the Spirit of Allah in the Quran, which Muslims say is the angel Gabriel, but when you start looking a little closer, you start seeing some problems. So we have got all kinds of issues to look into.
And we can't forget my favorite, since we talked about the Quran, the Islamic sources actually teach that the Quran on the Day of Judgment is going to appear as a pale white man, just like Muhammad, and it's going to intercede. It's going to intercede for Muslims with Allah. It's going to say, he was my companion in life. And so for those Muslims, since I brought this up, for those Muslims who think that Islam is the black man's religion, your hope is ultimately, if you're believing the Islamic sources, in the intercessory power of a pale white man on the Day of Judgment, known as the Quran, that was your companion in life.
And Muhammad, the whitest prophet in history. So, two white dudes. All right.
Dude, who stole my car?
All right, this comes from Ankush. He says, "Hi, David. God bless you for your wonderful work. Just wanted to know what Muslims answer when we ask, if Jesus was just a prophet, then why the virgin birth? I have asked many Muslims this question, but they say they don't know, and probably I should ask an imam. I don't know if I can meet an imam, and he will not try to manipulate texts to just reply to me." So, Anthony, I'm not aware of any coherent Islamic explanation for why Jesus was born of a virgin. Are you?
No. The Quran states that he was born of a virgin. Mm-hmm. The Quran states that Jesus was sinless, but it doesn't really give a rationale. Mm-hmm. In one sense, we might say that it does, but in the end, it doesn't. It does say that Jesus is the Christ, which, as we give our answer for why Jesus was virgin born, that'll factor into it. But the Quran doesn't seem to have any clue what it means to refer to Jesus as the Christ or the Messiah. It seems to think almost as if that's his last name or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no real comprehension there of what that title refers to. Mm-hmm. So it's a good question to ask, and you can expect to continually get blank stares and mumbled speech from Muslims.
Yeah. So in case everyone doesn't understand what the issue is, the question that you would be asking a Muslim is why, according to Islam. See, according to Christianity, we know why Jesus is born of a virgin. Islam agrees that Jesus is born of a virgin. The question is why. And is there any sort of reason? And at the end of the day, the Muslim can usually just say, well, that's a miracle. Allah wanted to perform a miracle. But the question would be why, right? Why Jesus, not Muhammad there? Because what you have with Jesus is born of a virgin. He lives the most miraculous life in history, according to Islam. He is the Messiah, according to Islam, and Allah wouldn't allow him to be killed, which you can read about all the prophets who are killed in the Quran. And Muhammad himself was killed by a Jewish woman who poisoned him, and then he spent a couple years in agony due to the internal damage that the poison did. So why is Jesus so incredibly different? It makes sense in Christianity for Jesus to be so incredibly different from everyone else. But why, according to Islam, would Allah make Jesus completely different in so many ways? And other ways, including sinlessness, right? That Satan could touch every child born into the world except Jesus. He couldn't touch Jesus. Why could Satan put his hands all over Muhammad but couldn't touch Jesus? Why is that? And we ask Muslims, and we just don't get answers other than it's the will of Allah. So if it must be the will of Allah for Muslims to be quite confused, because no one can figure this out. All right. Next question. Hi, David. Why do Muslims say the Bible is changed because of many versions? Well, the short answer is because they've been taught to do that, not because they've examined Bible versions or anything like that. They've just been taught to say that. They were taught to say that by Ahmed Deedat. They're taught to say that by Zakir Naik. I know that because Muslims every day send me the same exact wording of these objections that they got from Ahmed Deedat and Zakir Naik. Now, just to avoid confusion, lots of times people point to different translations, and they say, look at all these different Bibles. Well, all the Bibles I have here, yeah, they're different translations. You can have the NASB or the NIV or the KJV and so on. You have different translations, but that's not really different from what we find in the Quran. I have more translations of the Quran than I have translations of the Bible. So translations can't be the issue. But there are situations where Muslims can say you have different versions in the sense of Catholics have more books in their Bible than Protestants do. So you can point to differences like that. Now, just to be clear, everyone, Anthony, when Catholics have a Bible and Protestants have a Bible, are these different Bibles with like different Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans? Do they disagree on the letters of Paul? Do they disagree on the Gospels? What's the difference between these versions of the Bible?
Right. Well, when it comes to the difference between the Protestant canon and the Roman Catholic canon, Roman Catholics don't subtract any books. They have all the same 39 books of the Old Testament that we have, 27 books of the New, but they add what are called the Deuterocanonical books, which are books that were written during the intertestamental period, books like First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, and so forth. Now, interestingly, Protestants have classically said these books are useful. They're useful for giving us historical information and so forth, but we don't accept them as inspired scripture, so they're not on the same level as the other 66 books of the Old and New Testaments from a Protestant perspective. So, no, they have the same books as we do, and the books they add, there's not a whole lot in those books, though, besides, in any case, that are of any relevance to any doctrinal difference. I mean, there's a few issues, sure, but for the most part, you don't get a different view of God, you don't get a different view of, who the coming Messiah is, or who the Holy Spirit is, or something like that. Though Catholics would argue that you do find some things like purgatory and prayers for the saints and so forth in some of those deuterocanonical books.
So, because we know that most of our Muslim friends just do not understand what we're talking about. They get their information from people like Ahmed Deedat and Zakir Naik, who have no clue what they're talking about, or even worse, they get it from Yusuf Estes, who's even more ignorant, and as we've seen, believes that Alexander the Great founded the Catholic Church in Rome 3 centuries before Christ. So these are the kinds of guys that Muslims go to get their information about Christianity. So we want to break things down because we know that they've been horribly misinformed. But just to be clear, this is one of the Bibles I normally read. This is the New American Standard Bible. 39 books in the Old Testament, 27 books in the New Testament. Catholics, Protestants, everyone, Christians across the board agree they have the same 66 books in their Bible. The difference is, in Catholic Bibles, they believe some extra books were inspired that come between the two testaments, right? So you have the Old Testament and the New Testament. They point to some books that came between there and say, those are inspired too. And so you don't have Bibles with different Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. You don't have different Bibles with those. The Bible, all versions of the Bible have those. Now, what a Muslim will say is, well, since you had disagreement about those books, therefore that is corruption. And what's the problem here? Well, my Muslim friends, if you think disagreement about what the books that are included are, if you think that means that the Bible's been corrupted, well, then you have to say that the Quran has been corrupted, because Muhammad's own top reciters of the Quran couldn't agree on what was supposed to go into the Quran. Abdullah ibn Masud was Muhammad's top expert on the Quran. Abdullah ibn Masud said that Surah 1, Surah 113, and Surah 114 are not supposed to be in the Quran. He said these are Muslim prayers, they are not the Quran. That's Muhammad's top guy. Muhammad said if you want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from him. And Muslims have a Quran that's different from what Abdullah ibn Masud said. So you've got a problem here already. If Abdullah ibn Masud was right, then the Quran that you have today is wrong. It includes 3 extra chapters. If Abdullah ibn Masud was wrong, then Muhammad didn't even know who his best Quran reciter was. Muhammad pointed to the wrong guy. He pointed to the guy who had a misunderstanding of the Quran. So either way, you're in trouble. So if you think that a Catholic and a Protestant having a difference of view about these intertestamental books means that our Bible has been corrupted, then great, your Quran has been corrupted too. And by the way, that's not the only problem. Ubay bin Ka'b was another of Muhammad's top reciters. He had 2 additional chapters that are not in your Quran today. So his Quran had 116 chapters. Yours has 114. Go ahead.
I could throw in here as well. There are Quran translations that excise certain verses from the Quran. One of the things that put Rashad Khalifa and Edip Yüksel on the map is that both of them came out with translations that deleted, for example, the last verse of Surah 9, Surah 9, 128. And the reason they did that is interesting for a number of reasons. I won't go into both of them or explain these at any great length. Maybe we'll bring them up on a later show. But one reason they took it out was because it ruined their mathematical scheme. They claimed there was a mathematical miracle in the Quran, and this verse upset everything. So you simply remove it, and you've got your miracle. But the other reason is because they said the verse teaches blasphemy. Mm-hmm. Because if you look in the rest of the Quran repeatedly refers to Allah as most kind, most merciful. But in Surah 9, 128, which is one of the last surahs of the Quran to be revealed, and one of the last surahs of the Quran to be included in the collection of the Quran, it actually says that Muhammad is most kind, most merciful. And so they said this verse is blasphemy because it's speaking of Muhammad the same way the Quran everywhere else speaks of Allah.
There's also a historical basis. Namely, when they're trying to compile the Quran into a book, and the entire reason they were trying to compile the Quran into a book was because so much of it had been lost. Because the Muslims tend to think that all these Muslims had the entire Quran memorized. No. Muslims generally had different passages memorized, and some of those Muslims would die in battle, and then they would lose parts of the Quran. So the reason they put it into a book in the first place was to stop losing more and more of the Quran. And when they were compiling the Quran, they apparently had a rule that they needed 2 people who could recite a passage of the Quran, who had a record of the verses of the Quran. And when it came to the ending verses of Surah 9, they could only find 1 guy, but they also found someone who said, hey, Muhammad treated him as if his testimony is worth 2 guys. So there's a question there, right? Does that mean you can break your rule for having 2 witnesses if this guy is supposedly twice as reliable? That's a difference of opinion. So notice this was not a perfect process. And so if you're saying, hey, different versions of the Quran with different chapters, that would mean that the Quran has been corrupted because that's what you said about the Bible, then Muslims need to start saying that their Quran has been corrupted. All right, moving on here. Carmen says, "Hi, David and Anthony. I enjoy your videos and have learned a lot. I read the entire Bible over last year and finished early this year. I would like to start on the Quran now, but where and how do I start? In my understanding, one needs to read it alongside the Hadith. It's a bit overwhelming because it seems so foreign to me. Can you point me towards any resources? Do I just buy 1 book of Hadiths? As I gather, there are volumes upon volumes. I want to be as well versed as possible. P.S. I'm from Michigan." So, what do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I think one good thing a person can do is get a hold of Yusuf Ali's Quran with the running commentary at the bottom and work their way through that. You might also want to get a list of the chronological order of the Quran. Now, Yusuf Ali in his commentary will point out when this surah was supposedly revealed and so forth, but as far as I recall, he doesn't have that listed somewhere at the front or the back of the book. You just learn that as you go through each chapter, that this surah was revealed at this time, this date, in this place, and so forth. So it might be helpful to get a list of the chronological order in which the surahs were allegedly revealed, and then read the Quran in that order with Yusuf Ali's commentary in hand. Mm-hmm. Now, that isn't to say that Yusuf Ali is always right. He is obviously a Muslim, and he's trying to be an apologist at the same time. So when there are problems, he tries to smooth things over. But he's also very good at a number of points in basically letting the cat out of the bag, right? I mean, there are a number of times when Yusuf Ali doesn't appear to be aware of the damage that certain things that he's admitting create. So I think Yusuf Ali's commentary is very useful. It's certainly a very cheap route to go. I think after that, it would be good to then start picking up things like the tafsirs. For example, Ibn Kathir's tafsir of the Quran, because the tafsir will bring up the relevant hadith that interpret those particular sections of the Quran. So, in other words, the hadith obviously are necessary to interpret the Quran, but you're dealing with many volumes of hadith in Bukhari and Muslim and so forth. Trying to put those together with the different Quran verses can be a momentous task. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to easily do that in a very manageable period of time. Mm-hmm. But if you pick up a tafsir like Ibn Kathir, here you have a Muslim scholar who's done the hard work, and he's going to show you this hadith pairs up with this ayah of the Quran and so forth. So, and then the other thing is you can find some of these tafsirs online. Mm-hmm. I think altafsir.com. In any case, you can just put tafsir in search engine and you'll pull up a tafsir. Mm-hmm. So those would be some of my beginning suggestions.
Yeah. So, and I would agree with all of that. And that would be good advice because you seem to want to really go in depth. For someone who just wants to start learning about Islam to help in discussions, I wouldn't actually recommend just sitting down and reading through the Quran, because that is a recipe for giving up. It is a very, very, very difficult book to read. Tedious, boring, disorganized, confusing. Worst book I've ever read in my life. And I've read some really bad books in my life. And again, I'm not saying that just because I disagree with it. There are Islamic books that I find very interesting. The Quran's just not one of them. And so, I would recommend studying topically for most people. I would recommend studying topically. In other words, think of a topic that you're interested in and then look up the Quranic references to that sort of thing. So if you're interested in Jesus in the Quran, then look up all the passages that have to deal with Jesus in the Quran and read those. And you could get more specific. You could look up, the crucifixion or responses to the deity of Christ or Jesus' miracles. And you can look up all the passages that have to deal with that. Or if you're interested in jihad, then you can look up all the passages that deal with jihad. And so it's much easier to study the Quran topically. And so you can, and then also if you want the hadith references as well, you can do the exact same thing with the hadiths. Namely, find the hadiths that are relevant to those particular passages that you're reading in the Quran. And so studying topically does help, because if you're studying a particular topic, it's probably something you're interested in. And what you'll find in the Muslim sources is there will be lots of stuff no one is interested in at all. And so it can be very difficult to work your way through that material. But yes, if you are planning on really learning in depth, you can go through the entire Quran. If you go along with the tafsir, and the point of something like Ibn Kathir, as Anthony mentioned, is if you just start going through the hadiths, like if you grab Bukhari, which is 9 volumes, and you start reading through Bukhari, well, that's not tied very well in a very clear way to what's in the Quran. You'll read a hadith and it'll give a Quran reference and stuff, but it's not really organized. People like Ibn Kathir took all of that material and organized it for you. So yes, that will make it much easier to go through. And then anytime you're reading something in the Quran and then you're looking in Ibn Kathir for the commentary for what it means, and then he gives references to hadiths, then you can go look up in Sahih al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim for the actual hadith and read that. But if you go through. All right, we had a glitch.
I was on mute, so.
Oh, all right, we had a glitch. Apparently it started back up real quick, so that should have just been a momentary lapse. That is interesting because the internet is supposedly running pretty well here. But go ahead and read this comment from Nuketown, who is an agnostic atheist. Confused about his terms there because there would normally be a distinction between agnostics and atheists, but he says, "Hi, I am an agnostic atheist. According to Christians, atheists have no moral compass, and they have to get their morals from God. So how is an atheist to decide which version of the Abrahamic God is correct?" Now, watch, because this is going to get this is actually an interesting question. He says, "For example, you say the best evidence for your version of God is the crucifixion and resurrection. But in Islam, it says that it was an illusion. So how is an amoral atheist meant to decide? we can't say God wouldn't lie because we would be judging God, which is something Christians say atheists can't do, and we can't. So if that's confusing, I'll go ahead and break down the objection. Nuketown says that according to Christians, atheists have no moral compass. They have no basis for saying or believing what's right and what's wrong. And so this is going to present them with a problem if they're trying to decide what to believe about God. So I have said that not the only reason, but the main reason I became a Christian was because Jesus rose from the dead. And so Jesus was dead, and then he was alive again later. But Muslims say, Islam teaches that Jesus didn't die on the cross. He was raised, but he didn't die on the cross. Allah made someone else look like him, and so it was this other person who was crucified. And Christians would say, well, we don't believe that. That would make God a deceiver who tricks people for no reason and ends up starting false religions in the process. We reject that. But, Nuketown claims, Christians say that atheists have no moral compass, so how can an atheist even say the Islamic view is wrong, right? So, just to clarify, again, according to Nuketown, Christians are saying atheists have no moral compass. And therefore, if Islam teaches one thing about Jesus, and Christianity teaches something else about Jesus, and Islam teaches that it's all based on deception, Allah's deception, Allah deceiving people, that's why people believe that Jesus died on the cross and so on, it's all based on deception, well, that would account for the evidence if it's true, that would explain what happened. And the Christian view, likewise, Jesus rose from the dead, that would explain what happened. You have two explanations for the evidence out there. The main basis for distinguishing between these two is one just says Allah tricked everyone, and the Christian view says no, God didn't trick everyone. So, but how can an atheist say, well, it would be wrong for God to trick everyone, therefore I have to reject the Islamic view and go with the Christian view? Because, according to Nuketown, Christians say atheists have no moral compass, so they can't say what's right or what's wrong, and therefore both explanations are equally valid if atheists are amoral. They have no system of morality. Now, Anthony, why would this entire argument, although interesting, be flawed?
Yeah, well, the first thing that's problematic is it's not our claim that atheists don't know right from wrong, don't have any moral standards or knowledge of moral norms. We would argue that they do. The problem is they're suppressing the foundation for those norms. Atheists believe that certain things are right and certain things are wrong. I don't know any atheist who is consistent in rejecting moral norms altogether. In fact, if we were to misrepresent the person who made the comment's not on the screen anymore, but if we were to misrepresent the argument that was made, he'd probably be the first person to object. You're misrepresenting me. But then, of course, he shouldn't be objecting if there are no moral norms and he doesn't believe that there is something like right and wrong. The fact is, everybody recognizes at some level that there are norms and standards and objective values and so forth. It's a matter of justifying our belief in them and our use of them. And our argument is that atheists can't do that. Atheists can't account for the imperatives they want to issue to others, the condemnation they want to issue when something doesn't suit them, and so forth. So no, we would reject that first that starting premise that he has.
So we would say the atheist does know which one of those explanations for the evidence is better. That he does know there's something wrong with saying, oh, God just tricked and deceived everyone into believing this fake thing and deceived billions of people for no reason. We're saying he would understand that, but even though he does understand that, he does know his knowledge of right and wrong is inconsistent with his own stated worldview.
Right, and plus you have another problem here. If you're going to say that there's nothing problematic with Allah being a deceiver, why are you taking it at face value that he really did what he says in the Quran? The whole point. The whole point is that, you have in Surah 7, I think it's 99, where it says that the only ones who feel themselves safe from Allah's deception are those who are perishing.
Yep.
So not even a Muslim could feel safe from Allah's deception, in which case why would a Muslim trust that Allah is not deceiving him in the Quran when he tells him that he deceived everyone into thinking that Jesus was crucified? So I mean, even apart from the moral issue, you still have a question of truth. You can't have rationality, logic, and that sort of thing in a world where the one pulling the strings is a cosmic trickster.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, just to be clear again there, Nuketown, we believe you do have a moral compass, but we believe that even though you do have a moral compass, it doesn't fit in with your worldview. So you're suppressing the true source of your moral compass. Your moral compass can be twisted. It can be twisted into something else. It can be suppressed, but it's still there. You still know basic facts, moral facts about right and wrong. And so you are capable of distinguishing between the Christian claim and the Muslim claim. So hope that helps. Next question is from Miss Piggy. It's from Miss Piggy. She says, Allah needs to be stoned according to his own rules. He had sex outside marriage with the mother of the book, since the Quran states he has no wife. Love your reasoning and answers. Keep up the good work, guys. Now, if you, for people who weren't here yesterday, Anthony, what's the basis of this comment here?
Yeah, so Muslims object to the statement that Jesus is the Son of God on the grounds that Allah can't beget because he doesn't have a spouse. However, when we look at the Quran, it makes reference to the mother of the book. Mm-hmm. And that book is supposed to be the divine exemplar, the heavenly exemplar of other books that have been revealed to the prophets over time. And so here you have this mother of the book giving rise to other books, begetting other books, if you will. And so the question is, the logic of the Quran is you can't beget without a spouse. So if there's a mother of the book giving birth to other books, there must be a divine spouse for this mother. And who else is there besides Allah?
And so the basis for this, everyone, is that we're pointing out that Christians need to start bringing up this mother of the book point, because it's the only way of getting a point across to Muslims, that when we say Jesus is the Son of God, and they think we can only mean that we're saying God had sex with someone and produced Jesus as an offspring, and we say that's not what we mean, and they say yes it is, and we say that no, that's not what we mean, and they say yes it is, because that's what Allah says you mean, and we say no, Christian has ever meant that, and they say well, it's still what you mean anyway, it's the only thing you could possibly mean. The only way, and this isn't just for this example, this is for lots of different things. Lots of times, the only way to get a Muslim to understand your objection to his criticism is to show that if you follow his criticism through to its logical conclusion, he's just attacked the Quran. He's just attacked Islam. So if a Muslim is going to insist that when you say Jesus is the Son of God, you must be referring to biological reproduction, if he's going to make that claim, that's the only thing you can mean using these terms, then fine. You have to be consistent here, and since the Quran refers to the mother of the books, that must mean there's a mother of the book, there's a mother of the Quran. If there's a mother, then there must be a father. Who's the father? It's either Allah or someone else. And since it's the word of Allah, you should say it's Allah. But, and this is the basis for Miss Piggy's objection here. Hey, Anthony, you keep trying to talk, and you're muted.
Well, if Allah is not the father of the Quran, then the Quran is a bastard son.
Yeah, and Muslims don't want to say that the Quran is a bastard book, right? They don't want to say that. If they do, then please state it, Muslims. And so, Miss Piggy here says that since Allah has no wife, and yet must have had sex with the mother of the books to produce the Quran as an offspring, because that's the only thing these terms can mean, according to our Muslim friends, then Allah had sex with a woman who's not his wife and should therefore be stoned. Now, there's a problem. The stoning penalty would refer to adultery, so that would assume that Allah was married, but Allah is not. So it would be fornication, Miss Piggy. So if you want to use this objection, the penalty for fornication is lashes. So Allah should be lashed, according to our Muslim friends who are accusing Allah, they're accusing their own God of fornication by insisting that when you use terms like son, mother, and so on, you can only be referring to biological reproduction. How are Muslims going to get out of the claim that Allah should be lashed for fornication? It's to understand that when we use these terms, we're not necessarily referring to biological reproduction. And they're certainly going to want to do that, in which case we say, finally, we can actually start talking about what it means for Jesus to be the Son of God without your silly misunderstanding that, by the way, is Allah's misunderstanding in the Quran. All right, Anthony, we only have about 4 to 5 minutes left. Let's start checking out some comments here. If you see any you want to respond to.
Let's see here. I did see one earlier.
I've missed a few super chats along the way, but this most recent one says, I'm an agnostic, but if I believed, it'd be Jesus over Muhammad, as Jesus never chopped anyone's head from their body. So that is one way to draw a distinction between Jesus and Muhammad. But, you know, even if Muhammad had been the most peaceful guy in the world, he would still be a false prophet for many other reasons. So, yeah, I think a better distinction would be Jesus rose from the dead. And so if you wanted to believe in one, you should believe in the one who rose from the dead. But in that case, you wouldn't be an agnostic anymore. See anyone to respond to, Anthony?
No, there were some other super chats that disappeared somehow.
Yeah, we can always hit those later. We are down to, looks like 3 minutes.
Well, maybe I'll just go back to something then that we were talking about really quickly, because I did want to throw something in. You were talking about the codex of Ibn Masud and Ubay bin Ka'b, and how one had fewer and another had more. And I always find that interesting, because Muslims claim that the Quran is inimitable. Its eloquence surpasses anything that could be produced by anyone other than Allah. And usually when we say we look at the Quran, it doesn't look all that eloquent to us, they'll say, well, you need to read it in Arabic. Well, here you're dealing with two people that Muhammad said were among the best of reciters, the best to learn the Quran from, and so forth. And yet they didn't recognize certain surahs as parts of the Quran, Surah 1, Surah 113, and 114 in the case of Ibn Masud. So he didn't think that those rose to the level of the Quran. And he spoke Arabic, and he spoke it so well. I mean, he was one of Muhammad's companions and was considered, especially adept at the memorization of the Quran, its recitation, and so forth. And the same thing goes for Ubay bin Ka'b. So here you have people who are certainly qualified. If they're not qualified, who's qualified? And yet they didn't recognize certain things as part of the Quran, and did recognize other things as part of the Quran that contemporary Muslims would say are not there. And so when I see that, I always think, well, what then of this claim that the Quran is inimitable, and anybody who knows Arabic would recognize its passing beauty? Clearly, it didn't have that quality for these early Muslims who were disputing over whether things should be included or not.
Yeah, and Umar in Sahih al-Bukhari said that Ubay was the best reciter among us, but we leave off some of what he says, right? So notice he's saying, this guy's the best. This guy's the best at the recitation of the Quran. What's that mean? He's really, really, really good at Arabic. He knows his Arabic inside and out. And what's Umar, the second of the rightly guided caliphs of Islam, one of Muhammad's closest companions? What's he say? Yeah, he's the best reciter, but we have to leave off some of what he's got these extra 2 chapters. Wait a minute. The guy who's the absolute best says these other chapters are supposed to be in the Quran. I thought you could just read and tell what's supposed to be in the Quran and what's not supposed to be in the Quran. And by the way, there's the side issue there of the satanic verses as well. Namely that even Muhammad himself couldn't tell the difference between verses revealed by Satan and verses revealed by Allah.
And so, his Meccan kinsmen. The challenge was to them, right? He was challenging them, produce something like it. And when he recites the satanic verses, they all bow down together with Muhammad. Yes. Everybody seems to see no difference between other things that Muhammad purported to get from Allah and this other stuff he later said was from
So the
Satan.
Entire Muslim community, including Muhammad himself, could not tell the difference between a revelation from Allah and a revelation from Satan, meaning that Satan can reproduce exactly, can speak exactly, can reveal verses exactly the way Allah does. And our Muslim friends should find that very comforting, as they claim, as they do, that no one can write like Allah does. All right, our time is up. We got through a lot of people's questions from the comments section on the previous video. If you have more questions you'd like us to address tomorrow, then put those in the comments section, or jump on Patreon and become a patron and post a question there. We begin with those. And so other than that, we'll see you all tomorrow here, same time, same channel, here on Answering Islam Live. Anthony, stare at the camera, please.